The factory under the regulation include the following businesses or sectors: the hazardous materials industry, of course. We have the desalination facilities. Another sector we are dealing with, the swimming pool.
Welcome, listeners, to the Industrial Security Podcast. My name is Nate Nelson. I'm here as usual with Andrew Ginter, the Vice President of Industrial Security at Waterfall Security Solutions. He's going to introduce the subject and the guest of today's show. Andrew, how's it going?
I'm very well, thank you, Nate. Our guest today is Yosi Shavit. He's the head of the Industrial Control Systems Cybersecurity Department in Israel's Ministry of Environmental Protection. And he's going to be talking about some strict new cyber rules for sites that are handling hazardous materials.
Okay, then without further ado, here is you and Yosi.
Hello, Yosi, and thank you for joining us. Before we dive into the details of the new hazardous materials regulations, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and about the department that you're working in?
Oh, yes, sure. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit. In my profession, I'm a mechanical engineer from the Technion Israel, known as one of the best technology institute in Israel and maybe in the world as well. I have a lot of industry background and experience as a mechanical engineer. Over time, I performed professional retraining to be network admin in an enterprise organization. And then more than 20 years ago, I started working in the field of information security, doing a lot of hands-on work on a variety of information security products, such as firewalls, content filtering products, web application firewalls, data application firewall solution, and more. I also have a very strong technological background and also a lot of experience in writing methodologies and procedures. And 4.5 years ago, I made another shift to SCADA and ICS Cybersecurity world. And today I serve as the head of the ICS Cybersecurity Department in the Ministry of Environmental Protection. In my current role, I have written a new and unique regulation for the Israeli HazMat industry. And I have also developed a unique methodology It's unique all over the world, as much as I know, in order to support this regulation. I have MBA degree in business management from the Open University in Israel and 2 international cybersecurity certificates. The first one is CSM, Certified Information System Manager, and the second one, CDPSE, Certified Data Protection Solution Engineer. These 2 certificates were obtained from ISACA, it's actually International Certification Organization, which is located in the United States.
So you mentioned the new hazardous materials regulation. This is our topic. Can you start at the beginning for us, please? What kind of materials are we talking about here? Who uses them? How many of these sites are there in the country?
First, I must point out that all cyber protection activities with the hazardous materials industry began with 2 government decisions in Israel, decision number 2443 and decision number 2444 from February 15, 2015. In these two government decisions, the government ministries in Israel were authorized and demanded to provide cyber protection to entities under their regulatory guidance. For example, the Ministry of Health is supposed to instruct not only the ministry's employees, but also hospitals, health funds. For another example, the Ministry of Transportation should guide airports, seaports, trains, etc. And my ministry, the Ministry of Environmental Protection, according to the decision of the government, should guide all the factories that hold hazardous materials in Israel. And we have more than 4,000 factories, actually 4,262 to be accurate, which get a toxin permit from the ministry, from us, in order to be allowed to continue the business. So most of them have to renew this toxin permit every 1 year. And the factory under the regulation include the following businesses or sectors: the hazardous materials industry, of course. We have the desalination facilities. They add minerals to drinking water. Some of them are hazardous materials. We heard about the Florida attack 2 months or 3 months ago. Israel Electric Company, they have a large amount of flammable materials. Water treatment plants. In water treatment plants, they add acids and bases to balance the pH of the water. Materials like chloride acid or sodium hydroxide, which are very dangerous to public health and in high concentrations. We also guide the seaports and airports. In seaports and airports, we have transportation of hazardous materials like ammonia, bromine, chlorine, and near densely populated areas. Also, pharmaceutical industry, medicines. We have the pesticides industry, all kinds of fertilizers, defense industries, the semiconductor industry. We have their toxin gases for the production of printed circuits. We have hospitals also in our guide. In hospitals, we have ethylene oxide, which we called ETU, to sterilize medical equipment. If you don't know, ethylene oxide kills anything down to the smallest bacterium. And it controls by HMI station, controllers, sensors, and ICS systems. Another sector we are dealing with, the swimming pool. Swimming pool, we have two dangerous materials, hypochlorite and salt acid, to purify the water. But if you put each one separately, that's fine. But if they touch each other, they causes reaction in contact with each other. The reaction releases free chlorine, Cl2 molecule, that can harm public health very severely. Another sector, it will be sound maybe, it will sound maybe a little bit funny, but wineries. In wineries, we have sulfur dioxide, which we call SO2, for the preservation of the wine, of the red wine. It becomes sulfuric acid in contact with the air. And if we hack into such system and release a large amount of SO2 into the air, we will cause disaster. And if it, in the same time, it also rains, we can get acid rain on unprotected population. That's all the sectors that I deal with.
Wow.
Too much, huh?
So that's a lot of stuff to keep track of. You know, that's a lot of use cases. Can we spend just another minute on how this stuff came about, and then let's dive into the details here. I mean, you talked about the government decisions that authorized the creation of this regulation. Can you talk a bit more about how the regulation was actually designed to address this very broad set of needs?
Yes. I wrote the regulation. Actually, the regulation, first you have to understand that the toxin permit, we base on the toxin permit in the regulation, because the toxin permit, let's go to the start. In the two government decision that I talked before, they stated that every government ministry, like the Ministry of Environmental Protection, will use the regulatory tools that they already have to impose cyber protection to its domain. Not new regulation or not new rules, just the regulatory tools that they already have, okay? So the Ministry of Environmental Protection has a very powerful tool. It's the most powerful tool in the Israeli economy. It's called the toxin permit. The toxin permit allow for strong enforcement. This tool is for implementing the hazardous materials law since 1993 in Israel. We have a hazardous materials law, and the toxin permit is the tool to do it. The toxin permit actually contains conditions for transport, storage, and handling of hazardous materials for years, not from today. For example, separation between acids and bases, signage, safe transport, and now we use this tool also for cyber regulation. No special rules and no new rules. The main advantage of the toxin permit is that we can at any given time add additional condition into the toxin permit without the need of further legislation and without waiting for the permit to renew. We don't have to wait to renewal date. We just can add it any time, any day. And we in the ICS Cybersecurity Department, for the purpose of cyber protection, in factory, we take advantage of this toxin permit to add cyber protection condition. All this in order to force factories, to force them to raise cyber resilience as a regulatory condition. So factories must comply with the toxin permit that is renewed for the most dangerous factory once a year and the least dangerous once every 2 years or every 3 years. In case there is no compliance with the condition, the plant is exposed to the following things. First, closure of the plant according to Hazardous Materials Act. The second is criminal record for the factory or for the head of the factory or the board. And third, fine of about 800,000 new Israeli shekel per person and 1.6 million new Israeli shekel per corporation, so that one person who is also a corporation owner can get a fine without a trial that amounts to up to 2.4 million shekels, which it's about close to $1 million, $700,000 fine.
So, Nate, I'm reminded of our interview with Patrick Coyle, who had been following the CFATS, Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism standard in the United States for a very long time. Yosi here, I can't remember if it was on the recording or if it was before the call, but he mentioned that there's some 4,000 sites in Israel that are governed by these cyber rules. And Israel's only got a population of 9 million people. In Patrick's interview, I recall that there was something like 5,000 or 6,000 sites in all of the United States that were covered by CFATS. So, you do the math, the rules in Israel apply to 25 or 30 times as many sites as the United States. And, I was kind of surprised when I listened to the list of sites. I mean, I expected heavy industry. I mean, a big power plant has a large amount of ammonia there because they scrub the emissions to keep smog out of the air. And ammonia is a part of the chemical reaction that cleans out the emissions. But I didn't expect, hospitals and swimming pools to be on the list, but here they are.
Being that it can't be explained away as a simple statistical anomaly, why do we think that this is? Is it a cultural thing? Is it that Israel faces more ever-present threats and so they put more investment into this?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. Now, I don't have scientific evidence for any of this, but yeah, Israel has real physical threats they're dealing with. I mean, as I'm recording this, the terrorist group Hamas is still lobbing thousands of missiles at civilian targets all over the country. And, it's hard to tell exactly in the cyber world. In a lot of countries, the cyber regulations are actually classified. But from what I'm able to access, Israel has, in my estimation, the strongest cybersecurity regulations anywhere in the world. And this kind of agrees with other data points that I have. There are very strong cyber regulations throughout the Middle East, which is a region of high physical threat. There are strong cyber regulations in South Korea. There's again a very strong physical threat there. There are very strong cyber regulations in Singapore, which is kind of a tiny country surrounded by other countries who aren't that terribly friendly to Singapore. So it seems to me that the understanding of physical threat and the understanding of cyber threat, they kind of go together. And we see strong cyber regulations where there's a clear understanding of physical threat. To me, this is a little strange, though, because the cyber threat environment is global. Canadians, I live here in Canada, we have the same bad guys coming after us across the internet that everybody else does. So I really don't understand why it makes sense to have different cyber regulations in different parts of the world when, in a sense, a large part of the cyber threat environment really is universal.
Yeah, I take your points, Andrew, although it makes sense to me that a place with more significant present threats would have more regulations. So I do kind of get it. Nonetheless, let's return to your interview with Yosi to hear a little bit more about the nature, the content of these rules and regulations.
So thanks for that. Can we dive next into the regulations themselves? What do they require of these sites with toxin permits?
First of all, in order to support the regulation, a very unique methodology was written. You can find the full methodology in the Cyber Industry Guide that we have published. It's free for all. You can download it free from our website. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the only and first cyber guide of its kind. Actually, as much as I checked in the world, that deals with cyber protection for this specific HazMat factories. And the guide was in Hebrew, and the guide has been translated into English at the request of the OECD organization. And in the guide, we have the work plan for the plants. The work plan, and every plant received from us this work plan that consists of two main stages. The first stage is risk assessment. The second stage is implementation of controls. So the risk assessment has three sub-stages, and the implementation of the control has another 4 sub-stages. So we're talking about a total of 7 stages.
So you said 7 steps. Can you talk about those steps? What's the next level of detail here?
Right. Okay. So the first step is mapping of dangerous process and risk in the factory, and then for every process that deals with hazardous materials, they have to do cyber risk assessment, as written in the cyber guide. And then the third stage is classification of ICS system. They will know the level of risk, that they will know what controls that they have to implement. And they all already know the control that they have. So this is the first stage that they are done with the risk assessment, and they go to implement controls. So the 4th one is gap analysis. They will have to do the gap, and then to build work plan in order to close this gap. After they build the work plan, they have to work to do work, program execution, and last stage maintenance and monitoring. And this is cycle. This is a cycle of 3 years. The time limit for the risk assessment is 1 year from the date we added cyber condition in the toxin permit. And the time limit of implementation of controls, 2 years. So the total cycle would be 3 years. And the plant should perform the cycle again in 3 cases. The first one, after 3 years, another round begin. They start all over again. 2, if the plant added new hazardous materials to existing process, the OT staff will have to perform the delta. And in case of if the plant added another process of existing hazardous materials, here is another process. Again, they will have to do the delta for risk assessment and implementation control.
So in a classic IT cybersecurity regulation, you would talk about confidentiality, integrity, availability. What is the priority here for your regulation?
It is very important to know that we are a bit trying to shift from the traditional world of CIA triangle, which consists of, as you said, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is more suitable, I think, for IT, for information system. And we are moving to SRP world. SRP means S for safety. It's already implemented in my cyber guide, version 1.3. Next cyber guide 2.0 will include R for reliability and P for productivity. This will be in version 2.0 because I think that SRP triangle is more suitable for OT system than CIA triangle, which is more suitable for IT world, and we're dealing with ICS, with OT system.
Andrew, we talk a lot on this show about things such as safety and reliability, but productivity, as Yosi just recently mentioned, is not something we give quite as much mind to.
It is newish. Let me give you sort of the fast history of sort of security and cybersecurity priorities in the industrial space. Back in the beginning, we're talking 2003, 2005, 2007. The very first standards came out. They talked about CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. They said, in the OT space, it's inverted. Availability is the highest priority, then integrity, then confidentiality, and people talked about that for years. And when I came to Waterfall, I started interacting heavily with end users in sort of heavy industry, and realized that heavy industry really is talking about safety first. It's all about safety. Don't blow things up, don't kill people. They don't talk that much about it, but it's sort of ingrained in the culture. It's there. It's ever present. What they talked a lot about was keeping the plant up. If I have $1 billion investment in a power plant or in a water treatment plant, I need to keep that $1 billion investment producing results. And so people were focused day to day on keeping the plant up, not messing things up and tripping the plant. Reliability. And I started hearing people using those words sort of in conferences and webinars, maybe 2011, 2012, 2013. And in my 2016, my first book, I called out, look, it's safety and reliability. That's your priorities on OT networks. And in the years that followed, I sort of heard people talking more and more about efficiency. I heard it the first time in a Rails conference in Europe a couple of years after the Red Book came out. But efficiency is what drives automation. Everybody wants to make their $1 billion investment, produce more for less, become more and more efficient. And automation is the big way to bring that about. So efficiency is driving automation, is driving cyber risk. And so I've heard people talking about sort of safety, reliability, and efficiency very recently. And Yosi is sort of, at the head of the curve on that kind of terminology, but he doesn't call it efficiency, he calls it productivity. I think it's the same thing. So that's sort of the quick picture. Okay, so that's the priority. Can we dive into the details? How do we do this? I mean, I had a look at the regulation. The first thing that struck me was a formula you've got in there. Risk equals P plus I times 3. What is this formula? How do you use it in the regulation?
If you focus on the risk calculation, it consists of P and I, where P is the level of exposure to cyber attack, or in other words, the probability of cyber attack, and I is the maximum damage obtained as a result of cyber attack, or in other words, the impact, I for impact. We use the equation risk equal P plus 3 times I, which we adopted from the INCD, the Israel National Cyber Directorate. The formula has been tested by them and is definitely suitable for our activities in our plants. This was also proven in a pilot I conducted actually in the field, in the factories. So how do we calculate P and how do we calculate I? We do the calculation of P by an Excel file questionnaire containing 36 questions, containing to measure the level of exposure. I originally developed it with 42 questions, and over time I performed fine-tuning and got 36 questions just to consolidate. There are several possible levels of answers, from 1 to 4. 1 is the least exposure, and the 4 is the most exposure. For example, one question, for example, number of employees with access to controllers that manage, control hazardous materials system. So if we have more than 50 employees, so it will be level 4. The most exposure. If we have up to 10, it's less. We have many other examples. I don't think that we have time to give more examples, but that's how we do it. So after we finish the 36 questions and we do the average of 36 questions, and the level of the accuracy is quite high, even if you make mistakes in some some answers. The accuracy is achieved because of large amount of questions. And believe me, I checked it. This is P. To calculate impact, we have another Excel sheet that we have developed. And here in calculation of I, it is not the average, but the greatest value obtained from 4 questions concerning the CIA triangle. We know from the world of information security, but also the S, which presents the safety of the process. In calculating the impact, we look not only at the CIA, but also S, because we think S is more important than C. For example, when we calculate impact, we refer to 3 main scenarios. The first one is toxin gas dispersion. The second one is burning with high heat and radiation effect. In professional language, we call it BLEV. The chemists call it BLEV. And the third scenario, an explosion effect that creates high pressure that can come from a flammable gas cloud. This effect called, in the professional term, UVCE. UVCE is an acronym for unconfined vapor cloud explosion. So the common thing for all scenarios is that in all 3 scenarios, there is harm to public health, and there can also be environmental damage. And when we already know the value of P and the value of I, we can now calculate the risk by the formula risk equal P plus 3 times I. We multiply I by 3 in order to give a heavier meaning to the impact, because if a cyber event has already happened, we refer to it as WCS, worst case scenario, because the hacker will try actually to maximize the damage as much as possible, as much as he can. So, for example, if I equal 3 and P equal 3, then the risk will be a 3 plus 3 times 3, and we get 12. Then we go to the heat map. We have a heat map in our cyber guide. And the value in the heat map, the range from 4 to 16. The heat map is divided into 4 levels. Level 4 to 7 marked in green color. Level 2 from 8 to 11 it's level 2 and marked in yellow. And from level 12 to 14, it's marked with orange. And level 15, 16 are the highest and marked in red. So every plant that know the risk, know what controls to implement. And how we know by risk level what control we need to implement. When I developed this guide, I must say that I have chosen the controls one by one. I wrote them one by one very carefully, just what is needed, so as not to overload the industry and cause the collapse of factories. Our goal actually is to raise the cyber resilience, but not cause them to go bankrupt,
Targeted ransomware has emerged as the pervasive cyber threat to manufacturing operations. In 2020, all plant downtime due to cyber attacks was because of targeted ransomware. This is in spite of the IEC 62443 security design at these plants. A new ebook from Waterfall Security Solutions looks at targeted ransomware and manufacturing systems in detail. In the book, Dr. Jesus Molina concludes that a big part of the problem is incorrect classification. We need to distinguish business-critical IT systems from operations-critical OT systems. Once we have identified our systems correctly, Dr. Molina looks at what to add to the 62443 style defenses. It turns out we can enjoy the benefits of modern, connected automation without suffering the risks that come from connected automation. To understand 2020's lessons and explore modern solutions, please download the new ebook. You can find it at the Waterfall Security website in the White Papers area under the Resources menu.
Nate, let me summarize real quick. The formula is risk equals P, which is probability. Let's say risk equals exposure plus 3 times impact. So impact weighs very heavily. Exposure is measured as a questionnaire. You've got 13 questions. You give each question an answer between 1 and 4. You average the answers. It's sort of a fairly soft calculation. Impact is hard. You've got 4 levels of impact. If you're level 4, if let's say there's 17 events of toxic release or toxic contamination or whatever that you're worried about, and one of those events is a level 4 event. It's a big bad event, and all the rest are little tiny level 1 events. Your impact is level 4. It's the worst case. And then you multiply that by 3. So impact weighs very heavily in the overall calculation of risk. Probability, likelihood of an event weighs comparatively little.
Right. Now, what about the formula itself? Do you see these kinds of formulas that Yosi talked about elsewhere in the industry? Do you find them useful?
That kind of formula is not common. What springs to mind is the French regulations, ANSI, ANSSI. If you Google, ANSI Cyber Industrial Control System, you'll find 2 documents. One of them, most of the document is focused on their formula, and they have a very complicated formula. It takes like 5 or 6 pages to explain how to calculate how much at risk you are. It's not one formula, it's actually 6 or 7 formulas, one for each step, and then lookup tables, and then you take the results of the lookup table and plug them into another formula. It's really very complicated. In Israel, it's crystal clear. Impact, the possible impact, the worst case impact has the heaviest contribution to the risk calculation. In the French system, it's very hard to figure out what makes a difference and what doesn't in the final calculation.
Right. And so at the end of all this, you presumably end up with some sort of evaluation. You can put the given site into one of any number of buckets according to their risk.
That's right. In France, it's 3 buckets. It's critical infrastructure, so they care about reliability as well as safety. Their class 3 is kind of safety systems. Their class 2 is reliability critical systems. Their class 1 is business systems. In Israel, it's all about safety. So they've got 4 different gradations, 4 different sets of rules for different classes of safety critical systems. That's sort of the difference between the 2 formulas. So let's talk about the controls. The controls at you said, class 4 systems are the most stringent. One of the things that surprised me was that your most secure systems are required to have a penetration test every 2 years. It kind of makes sense, but a penetration test on a running system, I mean, is that not dangerous if the test succeeds?
You are absolutely right, Andrew. You put here some bomb. It is not recommended. I agree with you. It's not recommended to perform a penetration test for OT system in a production environment because the production line can be disabled and shut down. Such a shutdown involves large costs to the plant. But it is very important to understand the following thing. First of all, those who receive level 4 controls are factories that have direct and immediate risk to human life. We're talking about the death of people as a result of cyber incident. And when we talk about penetration testing, there are many ways to do this without harming the production environment. For example, digital shadow technology that allows us to simulate our system into files aside and perform the penetration test on it. In Israel, there is a large organization in Israel that has developed such a product through its own startup company. Another option is to set up a laboratory environment as identical as possible to the production environment and to perform the test there. In addition, you must know that a national cyber laboratory is being established in Israel in collaboration with the INCD, Israel National Cyber Directorate, and it's for the testing of ICS component and systems, and it's expected to be developed very soon. In addition, we require such as inspection once every 2 years. And my assumption is that an industrial plant shut down its production line at least once a year for maintenance purposes. So if you shut down, the pen test can be performed on the same annual shutdown.
Thanks for that. Some of the high-end requirements did not surprise me, but I work with unidirectional gateways a lot. Class 4 networks have to have either true air gaps or unidirectional gateway hardware in place, hardware that is physically able to send information out of the industrial network and let nothing back in. Remote access on Class 4 networks has to be unidirectional as well, remote screen view. What surprised me was section 12.12. Class 4 systems, it says, have to use operating systems that are still in support and have to use operating systems with continuous security updates. What does continuous mean in an air-gapped environment or an environment with unidirectional gateways outbound only? How can you get continuous updates into these Class 4 networks?
We mean that the controllers or the HMI software of the operation system must be continuously updated to known vulnerabilities. This does not mean connecting them to the internet, but rather it means taking care of continuous updating, even if the updates need to be transferred manually and via this key or into the OT network. If we take, for example, the Stuxnet attack that occurred in Iran in 2010, as much as I remember, there was a known vulnerabilities in the Siemens Step 7 controller that was not connected to the internet. And despite this fact, the attack was carried out. So we want to prevent such a situation. So the continuous actually is manually.
One thing I was very happy to see was requirement 19.4. Employees must be ordered not to accept instructions for handling hazardous materials over email or text message or even phone calls. You know, I documented a requirement like this back in my 2019 Black Book, but I know a lot of people who read the book were skeptical. They didn't believe that people were actually doing this. But here you've got it as a requirement, not just for Class 4 systems, all the way down to Class 2 systems. Can you talk about the requirement and why it's there and why it makes sense?
Actually, I also read your Black Book. Excellent book, I must say. And I took the idea from there. And also recently we are witnessing a very great ability of impersonation via mail or other ways, and even voice forgery. We have seen quite a few software also, quite a few software that know how to fake human voice, even prime minister voice. So I personally think impersonating a local worker is one of the most dangerous things in a factory that factory can experience. So I give the emphasis to this challenge even at lower control levels.
Andrew, somebody read your book.
It is music to an author's ears. I mean, I love to hear that. I mean, you invest so much in these things. If anyone's not familiar with the book, it's not a book about my ideas how to do stuff. I try to document what the world's most secure industrial sites do differently, and I put it out there really as a list so that people like Yosi or industrial security practitioners could say, look, I need to make my program the next step stronger. Where do I look? I put a list together, and people can cherry pick from the list and say that's a useful thing. That's what I'm going to do next to make my thing stronger. And I wanted to point out that you can buy the book on Amazon if you want, but Waterfall still has a program of giving away copies for free. If you folks listening are interested in a copy of the book, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me your shipping address, and I'll try hard to get one of the free copies out to you. One more surprise. You said that the focus of the regulations was public safety. However, requirements 25.1 and 25.2 and 3, they seem to be about repairing and resuming operations after a cyber incident. That sounds like a business continuity requirement. Why is there business continuity requirements in a public safety regulation?
You're right. Actually, my mandate in the Ministry of Environmental Protection is for public health and environmental protection. But in cyber attack on OT system and SCADA system, the control engineers actually lose control of the system. And often they lose the HMI screens with which they actually handle the hazardous materials, even due to a ransomware attack. So in order to regain control of the hazardous materials, and that's the point, control system, you must carry out a process of returning to business continuity to bring the situation back under control as soon as possible. Because if public health is important to us, it is better that the ICS that handle hazardous materials components will be under control, and therefore it is important to us to return to business continuity that will result in control as soon as possible. We want eyes to the hazardous materials in the plant, not to be blind. So we must go back as soon as possible to and return the business continuity, not for the business, but for the risks, for the public health risks.
So Yosi, this has been good. You're the expert on this new regulation. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on that I haven't asked you about?
Yes, two main challenges we have in our activities to increase cyber resilience in the industry. The first one is professional training. There are not enough experts who know both cyber, IT systems, OT systems, and control system. We try to train people for that. I open a special course in Israel to train experts in this area, and they have already been two successful courses. The first one was on July 2020, and the second one, February 2021. And I intend to open the third one on July 2021. It is very important to say that that as I publish a course, it fills up to 50 people in about 2 or 3 days. So there is a demand. The course is in collaboration with the Manufacturers Association in Israel. And I develop the content and also lecture, and they're responsible for the administration. So I do most of the job. They do the administration, I mean the Manufacturer Association, and the sponsorship. And every student gets certificate from us, and he can do cyber risk assessment in a plant. The second issue, or the second challenge, creating collaboration between the CISO of the plant, who usually responsible for the IT network only, and the control manager. It could be maybe mechanical or electrical engineer in the plant who is responsible for the OT network. I think that such a collaboration can greatly increase the resilience of the plant, because usually IT teams prefer not to enter the production floor and the OT networks because maybe it is noisy for them, dirty, they find their old technology, maybe old controllers or Windows 7 system, or even Windows XP in the HMI station. So in the factory, which I visit frequently in Israel, it was one of my main challenge to convince the teams, the IT and the OT teams, to collaborate. I must say that this is not an easy task at all, but I think it's the most important thing to raise the resilience of the plant.
Now, Yosi, your last comment here is a surprise to me. You know, I talk to a lot of people. I talk on this podcast. I talk to people at conferences. I have the impression that ITOT integration is well underway at most organizations. But that's not what I heard you just say. Can you talk about your experience in the organizations that you work with? Is ITOT integration really happening?
Andrew, I can tell you about my experience. I go to the plants at least 2-3 times a week. Okay, most I can say maybe 70% or 80% there is no collaboration between IT staff and OT staff, from the reason that I told you before. But now I see there is a new function in plants in Israel. It's called HSE. HSE, it's kind of big manager, is responsible for HSE, health, safety, environment. Okay, so this is his main interest, to take these two teams and make them collaborate and to work together. So I see more and more plants recently that bring this position inside the plant, and this is very good. But it's not. I can't see it in every plant. Maybe next years we will see it more and more. Maybe because the regulation, and maybe because they will understand, or the board will understand, that such collaboration is necessary to improve the cyber resilience.
Andrew, I noticed there the notion, as Yosi said, that 70% of the sites that he works with don't have IT and OT integrated, seems like a really high number.
It does. And, on the podcast here, we talk to experts. A lot of the experts are, they see each other at events. They talk to each other. I'm pretty sure my perspective is skewed. A lot of the people I talk to are way down the road on IOT integration, but it sounds like that's not the norm at all.
I suppose that off the top of my head, what might be the reason for all this is that it harkens back to what we were saying earlier in the episode. In Israel, you have a much higher percentage of facilities, a lot more different and varied kinds of facilities that wouldn't necessarily be under the umbrella of, a North American version of Yosi. And so Yosi's probably dealing with a lot of places where the folks there aren't necessarily quite as well versed in things such as, proper OT practice.
That's probably the case. I know, but what I take away here is we're probably going to hear people talking about the challenges of IOT integration for a long time to come, because it sounds like there's still a lot of work to do in a lot of places. It looks like you folks have made some great progress on this problem in Israel. Can you talk about what comes next? What are you working on now? What's the future of cybersecurity in this arena look like?
So the future, we add every year, we add more plans to the regulation, and we do another activity. We actually established SOC operation to give knowledge to the factories about open ports, about malware they have, about gaps. And this is another service that we want to give in the future, and maybe we will establish a very big SOC to connect physically the plants into our SOC, so we can give them the alerts and actually raise their resilience.
So thanks, Yosi. This has been great. Before we leave you, is there a thought you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yes, we know that most organizations and factories perform cyber protection for reasons of maybe information protection or reasons of business continuity. My mandate is in the Ministry of Environmental Protection is not protecting information, neither confidentiality nor on business continuity. My main goal is to protect human life. This is the most important thing. Protect the environment from various pollutants that can pollute the environment, the oceans, and our groundwater.
Andrew, how about something from you to take us out here?
Yeah, so let me start with the URL. The URL is actually a bit complicated. If somebody wants the English version of the standard, I would go to Google and Google cybersecurity requirements of a toxins permit. Google that phrase and you'll find it. It comes up, very first hit for me. I do recommend the document. It's an easy read. Everyone I talk to is interested in how can we take the next step? How can we make our security program the next step stronger? Because the threat environment just keeps getting worse. So here's an easy read. Here's a clear example of a strong security posture that you can go through and cherry pick and say, I'm going to take that piece, and that's my next step. So I recommend the document, Adhering to the Cybersecurity Requirements of a Toxins Permit.
Okay. Thanks this episode to you and Yosi. Thank you, Andrew, as always, for speaking with me.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Nate.
This has been the Industrial Security Podcast from Waterfall. Thanks to everyone out there listening.